My name is Magali de Castro. I'm from Bayside Medicare Local. I look after practice support and also I'm part of the chronic disease integration team. My colleagues are Michelle and Michelle, very easy to remember. Michelle looks after, well actually you both now look after the family and child health portfolio, which is essentially where immunisations also fall under. But because I'm the token clinician in Bayside Medicare Local, I'm the one to contact if you have questions around any obviously cold chain related queries or anything around immunisations, issues with the immunisation schedule, where do I go, what do I do, the person, but Michelle and Michelle are also able to help you. So we might get started with this cold chain talk, vaccine storage and cold chain management. How many of you here are brand new to cold chain and vaccine storage? Yep, a couple of you, good. How many of you are veterans and feel like, well, I'm kind of coming here to just check that I'm doing the right thing, but I feel pretty confident, good. All right, so why cold chain? Yeah, the idea is that obviously we're trying to protect vaccines so that they can protect us. Anyone here has experienced a cold chain breach in their practice? Yes? Would you mind telling me a little bit about what happened? How long ago was it? And just briefly.
That's all right. Go
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
This would be far more interesting.
Oh, I don't know. It probably is. We got hit by lightning.
Yes.
So our power board just went.
Right.
Blew up. Christmas
So
Day.
hit by lightning, not very common, but yeah.
Yeah.
So complete power outage, and that was over
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. So were you at the clinic?
No.
No, there was no one at the clinic?
No, the principal doctor tried to get him to log in.
Yeah.
I don't know what made him do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't get in, something's wrong. Happened to go down there.
Yeah.
And
so
smell smoke.
right.
Anyway, started from there.
Now, do you store a lot of vaccines? Do you do
A few.
A few, yeah. Usually the places that do travel medicine will tend to have, two massive fridges full of vaccines. A little quick tip for those of you who are practice managers and just in general, you can actually get insurance to cover the vaccines in your fridge. So in case of power outage or in case the fridge goes crazy, and we actually have had this sometimes, even if it's a purpose-built fridge, we've had cases where a fridge has frozen, gone to -18, which is obviously not a good thing. All right, so why this big deal? Why being so pedantic about vaccines? Aren't they quite hardy? And I'll show you a picture later on. We're trying to get it to all these third world countries because obviously we know immunisation, I believe it now, it's from the top of my head, it's that second most effective public health initiative or activity, only second to clean drinking water. Yeah, so this is worldwide. Yeah, so there's no point in us promoting, and there's a lot that goes with immunization. No point in us fussing about getting it in, working out the dosages and the schedules and whatnot, and then when we actually immunize, we're giving them essentially something that's not viable. Yeah, we're giving them duds. That's not what we want. So what is cold chain? Who would like to throw a stab? And don't read the notes, don't cheat. In your words, what do you think cold chain is? Any brave ones? What about from here?
Keeping vaccines in optimum temperature.
Yep, keeping vaccines in optimum temperature. Now, from when to when? So a cold chain is a system where we're transporting vaccines, storing vaccines, and up until the moment of administration in the right temperature, which is 2 to 8. Is that -2 or it's from +2 degrees Celsius to +8 degrees Celsius. Why do I say Celsius? Because sometimes people will have the thermometer in Fahrenheit and we go, I can't, there's a breach here. No. Just make sure that your thermometer is in the right type of reading. All right, why is it so important? As healthcare providers, we have a duty of care to administer effective vaccines, and that goes for all medications and all procedures that we do. Vaccines are also expensive. What's the most expensive vaccine that you have in your clinic? How much?
140.
140, 150. There's actually, I think there's a new yellow fever. Not yet, yeah. That's the Imogev, and I think it's over. Yeah, it's over $200. Yeah, that's one vaccine. Yeah, we tend to treat the vaccines that we get from the government as, well, it's free supply. Not a big deal if that goes down the drain, but actually all of it is extremely expensive. Especially if you have a whole fridge that has to be discarded because of a breach. It's also unprofessional and incredibly uncomfortable to have to recall patients to revaccinate if we do find that we've had a breach and we've given inactivated or non-viable vaccines. Any of you have been in that situation where you've had to, no? Lucky you, it's very good. And again, and this can happen to anyone. It doesn't mean that you have bad processes in place. Sometimes things happen, and so that's why it's good to understand how cold chain works and how we can put systems in place where if it does happen, we catch it soon and quickly, and we can fix or recall patients and make sure that we're protecting our community. It's also good for quality assurance, also known as accreditation, which my guess would be it's part of the motivation for a lot of you being here, yes? Because this is usually one of the areas that will always be looked at the time of the accreditation visit. And as we've discussed, if we're not doing this properly and we're thinking we're sending out people who are protected and they're not, we're putting them at risk of contracting vaccine preventable diseases, but also the community at large. Yeah. How sensitive are they? So what do you feel? Do you think vaccines would be more sensitive to cold or hot? Cold, hot. Who says hot? Yeah, who says cold? The truth is it varies. Different vaccines are more sensitive to cold, and there are others that are more sensitive to heat. But on average, frozen vaccines are the worst. And by frozen, I don't mean that you can see little bits of ice inside the vaccine. If a vaccine or the fridge reaches 0, a lot of the bulk of the vaccines in there are probably going to need to be discarded. But we'll have a chat about when to discard and when not to discard and what actually happens at the moment of a cold chain breach. So vaccines can be affected or destroyed if they're frozen, if they're allowed to get too hot, or if they're exposed to direct sunlight or fluorescent light. Okay? So how many here have glass door fridges? Yes? What do you do to make sure that the vaccines are not exposed to sunlight? One. Don't have them near windows and things like that. One of the recommendations is don't have the fridge next to a wall that leads to the outside, because then that wall is more sensitive to changes in temperature. So if we have a freezing day like today, that'll affect the fridge. If we have a really hot day outside, it'll affect the fridge. So try and have it against an inside wall. The other thing is, well, if we have a glass door, how do we protect it from not just sunlight, but fluorescent light, which is the majority of the lights that we have in treatment rooms and in our clinics? Leave them in their original containers. You should always leave the vaccines in their original boxes. We'll have a bit more, we'll talk a little bit more about this. Now, accreditation standards. This is where a lot of the pedantic record keeping tends to come from. What are actually the indicators? What are we actually after it when it comes to accreditation? We know that with accreditation we have these little triangles. They used to be flags, and we used to call them flagged indicators, but they're no longer flags. Now they're just a triangle, so it's triangled indicators. That's not accurate, I'm just saying. But, the first one, the ones that have a triangle, they're required. You will not be able to successfully pass accreditation unless you can demonstrate that you meet the ones that have that triangle. If they don't have it, then it's a recommendation, but it's not a requirement for accreditation. Now, for cold chain, all of these have a triangle, so let's have a look. The first one is our practice team can identify the person with the primary responsibility for cold chain management within the practice. So we should actually have one person nominated as the cold chain management responsible or go-to person. It doesn't mean that that's the only person that can check temperatures and do things. It just means that that's the person with the overall responsibility to check everything that's cold chain related. That person, the person with the primary responsibility, has this responsibility defined in their position description and can describe how the process used for cold chain management complies with the current edition of the National Vaccine Storage Guidelines. So the person that's the nominated responsible person for cold chain should not only know about this book, but should know how to describe that the processes that you have in the clinic are according to the guidelines. This book is actually very user-friendly. It's written in a very, very easy to understand language. So, and it's got a lot of images and, well, mine's highlighted everywhere because that's just how I roll. The third area is our practice can demonstrate how we review the following processes to ensure potency of our vaccines. One, how we order vaccines and how we rotate stock. Why would we want to know how we rotate stock?
So that you're not out of date.
So they're not out of date. And what else?
Using the oldest ones.
Exactly, and so we're using the oldest stock, or the one that's going to go out of date the soonest. Instead of topping up with, we brought a new order of ADTs and we just push the old ones to the back of the fridge. And now we're using the ones that really have longer to go in terms of their expiry date. So ordering and stock rotation, maintenance of equipment. So what's the equipment? And we'll obviously go through this in more detail. What are examples of the equipment that's involved in cold chain?
Fridge.
The fridge. Data loggers, yes. What else?
Fridge alarm.
Yeah, alarms, thermometers, yeah. And we'll look at those in detail in a bit. There should also be an annual audit of our vaccine storage procedures. And I get called a lot to say, oh, can you come in and do data logging of our fridge? Yeah, that is a form of auditing, or essentially checking that the temperature that we're reading, say either on the fridge itself or that the thermometer is reading is accurate. It's a double check. But it's not a requirement. You see, the data logger is a form of auditing, but it's not the required method. Yeah? What is required is an audit. Yeah? The audit, there's actually, and I'll show you this in a bit, at the back of this book, Appendix 1, so it's quite easy to find, vaccine storage self-audit, and it's a checklist. Yeah? So this is what's required to do on a yearly basis, is make a photocopy of that or print out those 2 pages if you have the PDF and go through the checklist and make sure that you're meeting all of that criteria. Then there should also be a continuum of cold chain management, including handover. So that's what happens with the person, when the person that's usually checking temperatures and looking after them, what happens if they're on leave or if they're sick that day? Yeah? Who looks after the vaccine fridge and who makes sure that when the GP just goes in there and opens the fridge door to give a jab, that vaccine hasn't been out of range. Yeah? So there has to be a system in place where we're able to train staff, yeah? And everybody knows then whose responsibility it is in case that the key person is not there. And the last thing is that how do we know the accuracy of our thermometer? Either the thermometer that's part of the fridge or a thermometer that we might have that's a freestanding thermometer. We have to have a way of checking the accuracy of that reading. If the battery on that thermometer starts to get a bit low, the reading might start going a little bit all over the place, and so you may be storing your vaccines or adjusting things, thinking that the temperature is one thing when it's actually different. Any questions so far? No? Around accreditation? No? Okay. So some of the key things to remember. We have to have that self-auditing for cold chain management, and that should be a routine part of our quality assurance. So I went around before this session today, and there's some practices that we're working a bit more intensely with, and we did an interview with these practices. And when I asked the question, how frequently do you review policy and procedures around cold chain? By far, the most popular answer was around accreditation time, yeah, which is every 3 years. There should be an audit, and that's, again, it can be as simple as just going through that checklist at least once every 12 months. Yeah? Quite rowdy next door. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Good. Now, there needs to be a member of the practice team, we've said, with the primary responsibility, because this is going to be the person that's the go-to person. Now, and a lot of the clinics that I regularly visit say, oh, well, look, you know, reception staff get trained very basically on how to know a bit about the vaccines. Who's the first person that tends to receive vaccines when they get delivered? Reception. Have any of you had an event where a vaccine box has been delivered, and sometimes they don't look any different to any other stock that doesn't need to be refrigerated, that's been delivered and it's just been left on the bench for hours? Yeah?
Well, we had the local pharmacy, and the boy comes on his bike at like 4:30, and he had a whole box of ADT. I think it was about 3 boxes.
Yeah.
They just gave it to the reception girl. It wasn't in a refrigerator or anything. And they just put it on our desk, and then we got there the next morning.
So this was, so just put it in the inbox for the nurse, but no idea what, and fair enough. Okay. Yeah. So this is where, and so what, did you do something around that to prevent that from happening again, or what did you?
Just run the pharmacy.
Run the pharmacy and say,
put it in a box, and you can tell the way, and you can tell the reception. Because they just put it in the fridge.
Yeah. Now, how do we know when we receive a box with vaccines? What are some of the ways that we can know whether or not they have had a cold chain breach before they even reached our clinic? Because cold chain starts from the moment of manufacture. Yeah. It ends with us, but it's a long time that these vaccines are being protected and looked after. How do we know if by the time they reach? Yes, there's freeze indicators often, especially with the ones that come from the government. There's a freeze indicator, and I'll show you what they look like in a bit.
Why does the government ones tend to come in the cardboard boxes just with those in?
As opposed to?
Well, whenever we get them from our pharmacy and other places, we get them in the polystyrene and they're more suitable. But I find it's all our government ones that come in just in that plain cardboard box.
Yeah, I don't know.
And we've got to check for that.
That's because they're coming in refrigerated
That's
trucks.
right.
They could be because they're more comfortable with the cold chain processes that they have in place with the transport. Whereas if it's a pharmacy that's delivering, or your local, medical supplier.
I'd start with something a bit more.
Yeah.
A bit more.
It's cheaper than vaccine.
It is, and that again, and part of it is the expense.
I can see that.
You can imagine
The expensive to throw out would be far worse than box.
And I should have brought the figures. It's something around, it's millions of dollars that are wasted every year in vaccines that need to be discarded. And that's just the ones that we know about. I have been to clinics where you open the bar fridge. Do not use bar fridges. You open the bar fridge, and it's the one that has the little freezer component at the top. That's got a bowl of ice around it. And the reason what they cold is because their vaccines, the cardboard of the boxes was wet. And they wanted to know if they could still administer them, if they were going to be contaminated. Why were they wet? Because this bowl of ice was dripping onto the vaccines. Now, how many patients they had immunized with these vaccines? Hopefully not that many, but yeah, these are, and this would have been a case where if they didn't know, and they didn't, they wouldn't have reported it unless someone like me or something like that had happened and go, wait a second, how many people have you actually immunized and how long has this been this way? Yeah. So there's millions of dollars every year of the discarded ones, but we don't know how many are not being discarded but should be or shouldn't be, because we should have good processes in place. The key to good cold chain processes, they should be simple, should be routine, and should be easy to maintain. The more user-friendly you make it, the more likely it is that staff will be able to do it and repeat it and teach other staff. That's the best. If your front-end staff members feel comfortable enough with the process that they can train any new staff that comes on board, That's the best case scenario. Yeah? Now, we should also have a written policy that includes all of this, and we've talked about this. Monitoring and recording temperatures, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Ordering and receiving vaccines, stock rotating, monitoring equipment, so that's our data loggers if we have them, or thermometers and freeze indicators if we use them. How we maintain equipment, and we'll have a case study later on of we actually have had a couple of clinics had an unusual fridge maintenance experience. We need to have a protocol in case of breach. We need to have a way of educating staff on an ongoing basis, and I'll show you some templates that I use in practice to train staff. We need to know how to manage power failures, because they can happen, without not fault of your own whatsoever. They just happen. And how to pack coolers, because sometimes we're going to need to go there if we have a power outage, or if we're doing outreach immunization clinics, or if we're doing workplace flu shots, for example.
Visits,
yeah.
Visits, yeah.
Good. All right. So the key thing is with equipment, the refrigerator must have enough capacity to store your maximum need of vaccines. When it comes to flu time, you're all of a sudden needing to use the fridges in the garage and things like that, we have a problem. Yeah? Or if all of a sudden, when it comes to flu time, the vaccine fridge is so overcrowded that you struggle to get one little box out from between all of them, that's a problem. We obviously need a fridge with bigger capacity, or we need an additional fridge. Okay? Our equipment has to be reliable and regularly maintained. Now, it can either mean having a maintenance person coming in and checking the fridge, or it can actually just be going through our audit checklist, which will prompt you for, are there any issues with the seals? With the seals of the fridge, have you noticed any wild changes in the temperature? Are there any weird humming noises or anything like that? So, know your refrigerator. What do I mean by know your refrigerator? Any guesses?
Maybe if you've had the fridge open and it goes up to 9 because you've had it open.
Yeah. So different fridges will behave in different ways. This is where something like data logging can be quite handy, because it allows you to get to know your fridge. What happens to your fridge when it's left closed over the weekend or over longer periods of time? Is it getting too hot, or is it getting too cold? Yeah? Because often when we just have a thermometer and it just gives us a maximum minimum, we don't know how long it was at that minimum temperature for, or how long it was at that maximum temperature for. With the data logging, we actually do get to see how long it was at each temperature range. The other thing is to knowing your refrigerator. Even with purpose-built fridges, the temperature is not constant or consistent across all shelves. Yeah? There's going to be some variations. If you have a domestic fridge, they usually are even more unstable than purpose-built fridges. Yeah? And there can sometimes be a difference of up to 2 or 3 degrees, especially in domestic fridges, between the top shelf and the bottom shelf, or something like the drawer underneath, which should never be used to store vaccines. Ever. Or the door. Yeah? Door and bottom drawers should only really be, and this is obviously for domestic fridges, should only really ever be filled with bottles of water. Yeah? Why bottles of water? How does it, because it stabilizes. How would it stabilize? So it increases what we call the cold mass, yeah, because those bottles of water will get cold, yeah, they'll reach that temperature that the fridge is at. So as soon as you close that door, even if you turn off the fridge, there's still all this mass in there with the right temperature. So just it keeps a more stable environment, yeah. So the other way to know your refrigerator is obviously, again, with data logging is one option. The other option is just grabbing a couple of thermometers, and we'll have a chat about a case that we had in the locally in one of the local clinics, where you can just have, if you have 2 thermometers, or you can borrow one from another clinic, put one on each shelf and see if they're giving you the same reading, or if one is consistently 1 or 2 degrees above or below. We've talked about this. Ensure that you're reading the thermometer in Celsius, so with a little C, not that F. Check accuracy and replacing battery annually, and we'll talk about how to do this. We need to be recording. We need to have a chart, yeah, recording temperatures. How frequently do we need to do this? This is once a day. Who said twice a day? So the actual requirement is at least once a day. And at what time should this be done? First thing in the morning. Why first thing in the morning? Because you've been closed all night. Why else? To detect the breach before we start immunizing for the day, yes? Makes sense. Good. Now, the requirement is at least once a day, first thing in the morning, but the recommendation is actually twice a day. Yeah, so first thing in the morning and when you're closing. So now that's the thing that's going to be changing. Now, that was one of the tips. Insider trading from talking to the Department of Health, saying that one of the recommendations now is going to be strongly, even if you have a purpose-built fridge, to move to twice daily checks. It doesn't take that long if you train staff to do it. One of the easiest ways is whoever opens the clinic, it's their responsibility as part of the opening routine procedures, check the temperature, record it. Same with whoever is closing the clinic, as part of the procedures, check. Should only take 1.5 minutes. Yeah. Keep door openings to a minimum. What strategies do some of you have in place to make sure that we keep the door shut as much as possible? You have a sign on the fridge. What does it say? Just
do not open.
Do not
open.
open.
Know what you
until
know where you're going and what you're getting.
Yes. So the glass door fridges obviously are handy because you can see where you're going and then you just have to open it when you need to grab something. What do you do if you have a solid door fridge?
You label it.
You can label it, yeah. Some people do what I did this in one of my practices. Put a map outside of the fridge. So on the outside of the fridge, you have the diagram of top shelf, middle shelf, and where we're keeping all the different things. So you go, okay, so I'm gonna need that one, that one, that one. Okay, open. Yep, and then close straight away. Good. Do not store food or other goods in your vaccine fridge. Now, people are really good with this now. I haven't been to, it's probably been a while since I've seen a fridge that's mixing, having lunch boxes alongside the vaccine. Everyone who's handling vaccines, even the ones that are just receiving the vaccines when they're delivered, need to receive training on cold chain and understand why it's so important. And, well, as we said, the designated person has to be trained, but you need to also have a backup person in case that person's not